Once, in some near forgotten time, a traveler making his way across these mountains on foot wandered into our valley, which is known as Trial. Warm and dusty and overwearied, he came to our door and eased his heavy pack and asked for refreshment. And Devola brought him a pail of water from our spring, pure and so cold it made him clench his teeth. "Where have you been?" we asked. I raised a khaki arm and pointed first to Sugar Boy that rises to our east, and then to old Joshua that lifts darkly to our west. Up there. What for? For the memory. Defola thought this was a funny answer. She laughed and ran down into the yard and hid herself behind a flowering rhododendron and peered out at us through its white lacy veil. I said, "Don't pay her any mind. She's cloudy-headed. Why did you say you had been up to Sugar Boy and old Joshua for the memory? That wasn't a real answer, was it?" "Yes," replied the traveler. "That was a real answer." "They're pretty now," I said, "because everything is in bloom, trillium and shade bush and the violets and all the other spring beauties. But we've just come through a terrible winter. There was snow 6 feet deep in this valley with drifts up to 10. Everything was frozen, and we thought we would never thaw. Romy and I couldn't even get to school." "Who is Romy?" inquired the traveler. "He's my little brother. In the winter, when everything's frozen, I hate the mountains. Then they're ugly." The traveler said, "Today at noon, I leaned my back against a cloud and ate my lunch. And afterward, coming down the slopes, I saw a lake of blue flowers and then a long, wide scarf of deep maroon ones. This is fair land, the fairest I have ever seen." I never saw the traveler again. An hour later, he disappeared into the mists that sometimes cover this valley in the spring. But I have never forgotten what he said. This was fair land, the fairest of them all. This is where the lilies bloom. Like I said, Devola is cloudy-headed, and this is one thing I cannot understand because none of the rest of us Luthers is that way, but Devola is for sure. So each day I have to explain the whole of our existence to her. Her confidence in my ability to do this is supreme, though there are 4 whole years difference between her age of 18 and mine of 14. Devola can't remember twice around a gimlet. When we go of a morning to the lower slopes of old Joshua and Sugar Boy, we gather witch hazel leaves. She always acts like she's never seen any of it before. "Look," she exclaims, "look at how pretty it all is. Don't you think it's pretty, Mary Call?" "Yes, it's pretty, but we haven't got the time to stand around and gawk now, Devola. Oh, here we are. Here's where we left off yesterday. Aren't these leaves nice and thick? Shall we fill your bag first or mine?" Devola shook her bag open and looked down into its emptiness. "It don't differ. Either way, it's just plain work." She moved around to the north side of the witch hazel bush and began snatching the smooth, wavy toothed leaves from its limbs. "How many pounds did we get yesterday?" 3. Don't put in twigs, Devola, just leaves. Devola fished 2 twigs out and discarded them. "How much is that?" 45 cents, maybe. If that man at the drug company or Mr. McConnell from the general store had to come out here and do this for one morning, I bet it'd be a sight more than that. People are stingy with money, aren't they, Mary Call? Some are. A lance of clear sunlight wavering through the overhanging boughs touched Devola's face and hair. She stepped back away from it and turned and looked across the valley. In the distance, Kaiser Peace, high on his tractor, was creating clouds of furious black dust. Between him and us, the lonesome hills were a bright, shimmering yellow. Devola said, "Kaiser wants to marry me again, but still Roy Luther says no. I told him it don't differ to me one way or the other, but that's all that he says. No." "You don't know anything about marriage, Devola. Aren't you going to help me pick anymore?" Devola came back to the bush. "Kaiser's got a nice house. I just love his kitchen. Everything in it's yellow. Of course, he doesn't keep it good, but I would. I'd wash everything every day." "You would, huh?" "Yes. I referred to one of Kaiser's superstitions, a keyhole opening he had made near the top of his chimney. As an exit for witches, I asked. Would you wash his witch's keyhole too, or would you plug it up so no more witches could get in or out? Devola smothered her long cascade of glowing hair. I wouldn't bother his keyhole. He watched his witches, wouldn't bother me. I just love his house. Just think, all of us could live in it if I married Kaiser. You and Emma Dean and Romy and me and Roy Luther, all of us. Wouldn't that be nice? No, we like it where we are. Devola, are you going to help me pick or aren't you? With a languishing look, Devola picked 2 leaves. Roy Luther owes Kaiser money. Yeah, well, he might get paid back someday. Gently, Devola deposited 3 twigs. If Roy Luther was to give his say-so for me to marry Kaiser, Kaiser would forget about the money and give him 20 acres of land and the house we're living in. Roy Luther has already earned the land, Devola, 20 times or more over, and he might just as well give us the house. It's falling down. Nobody else would have it. You don't like Kaiser, do you, Mary Call? No. Why? Because he's ignorant. Nobody but an ignorant person would have a witch's keyhole in his house. And he's an old greedy gut and a cheat. There isn't another man in the whole world would come in here and sharecrop for him the way Roy Luther has for so little. Just years and years of it. And when the time comes for tallying up, Kaiser always getting the hog share and Roy Luther always having to settle for the meanest. Devola gazed at me. I wish you wouldn't be so mad at everybody all the time. It makes you ugly. Kaiser's lonesome, she offered. He told me how lonesome he was. Yeah, well, it's his own fault. He hasn't got anybody. I heard him brag about how he ran all his kin off years ago. This bush is striped clean, Devola. Let's move on up a ways. The August sun, full now in mid-morning, was warm on our bare heads. Far above us, Sugar Boy's spine loomed black-green. The air was richly peppered with a cool, sharp perfume of balsam and a soft, tepid scent of sugar-fresh vegetation. Deep in a tangle of wild honeysuckle, a Carolina junco trilled its sweet bell song. Devola wears a look of suffering when she's made to come on these work jaunts, but it's like no other suffering I've ever seen. It's tender and sly and secret. We located a new fresh bush, and I took one half and assigned the other half to Devola, and obediently she moved around and began plucking, but in a minute parted the branches and looked at me through the wavy green light. Mary Call? What? I forgot my sack. I left it back yonder. For Devola, I have many fears, and I have others too. Some for our parental parent, Roy Luther, and some for Emma Dean and Romy, and a few for myself also. They are not rash. They are not just things that happen to fritter into my mind because nothing else was there to busy it. They are old fears with me. Oh, I feel it, this bottomless stomach of fright when I look at Devola and see her so free and innocent, so womanly in form, but with a child's heart and a child's mind. I feel it when I watch Emma Dean and Romy at their make-believe games, so carefree that they are never a thought in their little heads as to how they're going to get decently raised. And when I look at Roy Luther, who is coughing his life away, we know now that it isn't just worms that turn him so white and panting, weak, though we keep doctoring, laying out hope each time along with the salves and other medications. Roy Luther has made me promise him some things. When the time comes, which he hopes will be in his sleep, I am to let him go on as quietly as he can, without any wailing and fussing. I am not to call any doctor or allow anyone else to call one. If it happens at night, I am to wait until morning before I tell the others. I am not to send for the preacher or undertaker. The preacher has a mighty voice in these mountains, but he expects to be paid for his wisdom. And the undertaker, for all his hushed liquid speakings of how paltry his tariff will be, can be ill-humored and short-tempered when the time comes to divvy up, as we found out in the case of Cosby Luther, my maternal parent, who died of the fever 4 years ago. So it is that Roy Luther has requisitioned me to give him a simple, homemade burial when the time comes. After I am sure his heart and breathing have stopped, I am to wrap him in an old clean sheet and take him to his final resting place, which will be within a stand of black spruce up on old Joshua. We have not talked about how I'm going to get him there. Were you to ask Roy Luther, it would shame him to have to say aloud that it will have to be in Romy's wagon, and he'd have to say what for me to do with the feet, which will surely drag because the vehicle is but a toy. I am worried about Roy Luther dying and how I am to get him decently and honorably buried. But more than that, I am worried about the other responsibilities he has charged me with, the other promises he has wrung me with. Number one, I am always to take pride in having the name of Luther and instill this pride in the others too. Number two, I am to strive with everything in me to keep our family together and not ever take charity from anybody, even if our tongues hang out parched down to our knees, because charity is seldom of real service to those upon whom it is bestowed. And those who receive it are always looked upon with suspicion, every need and want scrutinized. Number three, I am to keep Devola with me always. I am to be good and kind and loving to her and see to it that the others are too. I am not to let her marry Kaiser Peace. If ever it looks to me like this is about to happen, then I am to go to town, find the nearest judge, tell him about how Devola is, and get him to stop it. On my word of the highest honor, I have promised Roy Luther all of these things. Just how I am to bring them about, I don't know, nor does he. Never a strong man or one able to think things out, he spends now most of his waking hours in his porch chair. The valley is there before him, big and rich and abundant, but he doesn't see it anymore. The worms, or whatever it is that started the sickness in him, have taken all the caring out of him. 3 or 4 times a day, I ask him if he doesn't want me to doctor him, and he always says yes, and I fetch the bottle of turpentine and smear a good amount of the stuff around on the base of his throat, where he says the worms are the most active. It is a futile action, and we both know it. But when it's finished, Roy Luther leans back and closes his eyes and says he feels better. He lets things beat him, Roy Luther has. The land, Kaiser Peace, the poverty. Now he's old and sick and ready to die. And when he does, this is what we'll inherit, his defeat and all that goes with it. Sometimes when I look at him, I'm stirred to an unholy anger. I think, God help me, Roy Luther. I don't want you dead, and that's the truth. But since it's going to happen anyhow, I wish it could hurry up and be over with, for it's pulling us all to pieces. And I need to get on with things and try to fix them around so that life will be easier for those of us who are left. And I get scared and I think, but how am I going to do this? Who will show me how? And who will help me? And then I get madder and I say to myself, quit your belly aching. There's a way. All you have to do is find it. Oh, that witch hazel leaf's weighed a pound apiece. Going home, I expressed this wry wish to Devola, but she just smiled and said she was hungry. Okay, so let me stop it right here.